All right, today's stories are basically about people trying to push their luck and getting shut down hard. First, a company that tried to pressure an employee at their lowest point and got checked instantly. Second, a manager who walked in acting like he was better than everyone and got humbled in record time. And finally, a divorce that didn't end at the paperwork because someone decided stealing $300,000 was a good idea. Yeah, this one gets wild. Here we go. My company tried to pressure me. My doctor shut it down. I've been dealing with mental health issues for years, the kind that don't just disappear because you clock in at 9 a.m. and pretend everything is fine. For a long time, I managed to keep it together well enough to do my job, even when the workload got ridiculous and clients started piling on pressure. I was the reliable one, the person who didn't complain, the one who stayed late and picked up slack. But over the past year, things started slipping, and I could feel it in a way I couldn't just power through anymore. A few months ago, I finally reached the point where I stopped pretending and asked for help. I told my manager straight up, I'm not okay. I need to move to a different team or something less intense. To their credit, they didn't shut me down immediately. They nodded, said they understood, and promised they'd find a way to transition me. For a brief moment, I thought maybe they actually meant it. What followed was weeks of delays and excuses. Every time I followed up, I got a slightly different version of the same answer. We're still working on it, or we can't move you yet because the client needs continuity. Or my personal favorite, we just haven't found the right replacement. It felt like they were just buying time, hoping I'd either recover on my own or stop asking. Meanwhile, things kept getting worse. I was struggling to focus, constantly exhausted, and honestly just hanging on by a thread most days. I started bringing up the idea of going on disability leave because I knew I couldn't keep functioning like that. Each time it was brushed off or redirected. Let's try to get you moved first, they'd say, as if that solution was actually moving forward. Then early one morning, I got a calendar invite that didn't sit right. No context, just a meeting with my manager and the HR director. I joined the call, and within the first couple of minutes, it became clear this wasn't a check-in. It was an ambush. The HR director, who also happens to be the CEO's wife, jumped straight into it. We reviewed your performance and your situation, she said, her tone completely flat. At this point, you have two options. We can proceed with a disciplinary process, which may lead to termination, or you can go on disability leave. I blinked for a second, trying to process what I was hearing. I've been asking to go on disability for months, I said. You kept telling me to wait. She didn't acknowledge that at all. Those are your options, she repeated. At that point, the choice was obvious. Fine, I said. I'll take the disability leave. You'd think that would be the end of it, or at least a moment of basic human understanding. Instead, she immediately leaned forward and said, you need to have the doctor's paperwork completed today. I actually laughed because it sounded so ridiculous. That's not realistic, I said. I've already spoken to my doctor. She just got back from leave and has a backlog. She can't do it today. Her response was instant and sharp. Then you need to go to the doctor's office and get it done, today. There was something about the way she said it that flipped a switch in my head. I'd spent months being patient, reasonable, and cooperative. At that moment, I decided I was done negotiating. All right, I said, I'll go. The drive to my doctor's office is about 2 hours with traffic, and I made every minute of it count in my head. If they wanted me to drop everything and show up in person for paperwork that couldn't realistically be rushed, I was going to follow that instruction exactly. When I got there, the place was packed. I checked in, explained the situation, and waited until I could catch my doctor for even a moment between appointments. When she finally stepped out into the hallway, I managed to grab about 2 minutes of her time to explain what was going on. She listened, frowned, and said, "They want this done today?" "Apparently," I said. "They told me to come here and make it happen." She shook her head, clearly annoyed. "Do you mind if I'm a bit blunt in my response to them?" I didn't even hesitate. "Please do." I don't know exactly what she wrote in that email, but I have a pretty good idea it wasn't gentle. Within an hour, my phone buzzed with a message from HR. The tone had completely changed. "Given the circumstances," she wrote, "we can allow additional time for the documentation to be completed. Please aim to have it submitted within the next week." I read it twice, just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The same person who demanded it be done today was now giving me a full week without any pushback. I replied with a simple, "Understood. I'll have it done as soon as possible." Driving back home, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while. It wasn't exactly relief, and it wasn't satisfaction in the traditional sense. It was more like a quiet confirmation that I wasn't crazy for pushing back. I spent years giving that company everything I had, and when I needed support, they tried to corner me into a situation that worked best for them. The moment someone with actual authority outside their bubble pushed back, their entire stance shifted. Now I've got the time I originally needed, and I'm taking the steps to get myself in a better place. Meanwhile, I've heard through the grapevine that the client we were bending over backwards for has started looking elsewhere. I don't know what happens to that company long term, and honestly, I don't need to. I've got my own priorities now, and for once, they're not at the bottom of the list. The client leaving isn't karma, it's the natural result of burning through people who actually did the work. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're someone who finally realized that no job is worth losing your career over. And that realization? That's not a breakdown, that's a breakthrough. And our second story. He claimed he didn't need us, so we let him prove it. About 15 years ago, I was part of a solid little sales team in a mid-sized company. Nothing flashy, but we were consistent, usually above target, and generally got along well. Then, management decided we needed fresh leadership energy, which is how Kevin arrived. From the moment he walked in, it was obvious he wasn't interested in learning anything about us or how things worked. He carried himself like he'd just been hired to save a failing empire, not manage a team that was already doing fine. Kevin's favorite topic was Kevin. Within his first hour, we'd heard about his previous company, his record-breaking quarters, and how he'd apparently rocketed up the corporate ladder faster than anyone before him. If there was a pause in conversation, he filled it with another story about how incredible he was. It wasn't confidence, it was a nonstop infomercial, and none of us had signed up to watch it. His first team meeting set the tone. He stood at the front like he was about to deliver something profound and launched into his speech about standards, excellence, and how we weren't pushing hard enough. This was while our numbers were already above target, which made it even stranger. You could feel the room shift as people exchanged looks that said, "Is this guy serious?" Then he dropped the line that sealed it. "I could hit your team target on my own," he said, completely straight-faced. "If you can't smash it as a group, something's seriously wrong." There was a beat of silence, and then one of my colleagues, Mark, leaned back in his chair and said, "That's actually a brilliant idea. Let's make it a competition. You versus all of us." The room came alive instantly. People started laughing, clapping, and throwing out comments like, "Yeah, show us how it's done." As if the timing had been scripted, our director walked in right then. "What's going on in here?" he asked, looking around at the noise. Mark didn't miss a second. "Kevin's going head-to-head with the team this month," he said. "Bit of motivation, bit of fun." The director smiled, clearly entertained. "I like it," he said. "Let's see what happens." Monday morning of the first week, Kevin showed up like he was about to prove a point. He was pacing, adjusting his headset, talking about strategy out loud like we needed a running commentary. The rest of us just got on with our calls like we always did. By the end of the day, the scoreboard was simple. The team had multiple deals on the board. Kevin had none. Tuesday didn't go much better for him. Wednesday was worse. By the end of the first week, he still hadn't closed a single sale. Meanwhile, the office had turned into a running joke. Every time someone made a sale, they'd glance over at Kevin's desk just to see how he reacted. He tried to act like it didn't bother him, but it clearly did. By week 2, even our newest hire, the quiet guy named Tom, who'd never worked in sales before, started outperforming him. Tom would land a deal, and the whole office would erupt like he just scored the winning goal in a final. "That's how it's done, Kevin," someone would shout, and Tom would go red, trying not to laugh. Kevin's attitude shifted fast. The confidence turned into irritation, then into outright frustration. Calls got shorter. His tone got sharper. One afternoon, after hanging up on a prospect, he slammed his headset on the desk and muttered, "This system is a joke." Mark didn't even look up from his screen. "Funny," he said. "Seems to be working for everyone else." By the third week, Kevin had entered full meltdown mode. Phones were being dropped a little too hard. Chairs scraped loudly across the floor. At one point, he stood up and announced to no one in particular, "There are factors here you're not considering." No one asked what those factors were. "There are factors here you're not considering" is the universal cry of someone who's run out of excuses. Kevin couldn't admit he was wrong, couldn't admit the team was good, couldn't admit he had overestimated himself, so he invented invisible factors to preserve his ego. But the team didn't need to hear his excuses. They had the scoreboard, and the scoreboard doesn't care about factors. The rest of us, on the other hand, were having the best month we'd ever had. There was something about the shared goal of proving him wrong that brought everyone together. People were helping each other more, sharing leads, pushing harder, and actually enjoying it. Numbers went through the roof, and the atmosphere was better than it had been in years. Kevin didn't make it to the end of the month. One morning, his desk was empty, and we got a short email saying he'd decided to pursue other opportunities. The director didn't call a meeting, didn't make a speech, just carried on like nothing had happened. We all knew what it meant. A few days later, the final numbers were circulated. The team had not only beaten the target, we'd smashed every previous record the company had. Kevin's total sat there at the bottom, a single lonely figure that didn't even come close to anyone else's. Mark printed out the results and pinned them to the board. Educational, he said, tapping the page. Very educational. Years later, I looked Kevin up out of curiosity. His profile was still full of the same kind of language, world-class, results-driven, industry-leading. It also said he was open to new opportunities, which felt like a polite way of saying the same story kept repeating. Every so often, someone from that old team will bring it up, and we'll all remember that month. Not because of the targets or the numbers, but because of how one guy managed to unite an entire office without even trying. And our last story. My ex-wife stole $300K in crypto. I'm 34 now, and 2 years ago I finalized a divorce from my ex-wife Lauren. It wasn't friendly, and it definitely wasn't clean. She ended up with the house, the dog, and a settlement that I won't pretend was small. I kept my retirement accounts and my crypto portfolio, which at the time sat around $300,000 on a hardware cold wallet. She knew it existed during the marriage, but during negotiations, she waved it off and signed away any claim to it, calling it stupid internet money more than once. After everything was done, I moved on as best I could. I focused on work, rebuilt my routine, and honestly didn't check that wallet very often. It wasn't something that I traded daily. It was long-term, tucked away and secured in a small safe at home. Or at least I thought it was secure. That assumption turned out to be my biggest mistake. About a month ago, I decided to check the balance for the first time in a while. I plugged in the device, expecting nothing unusual. Instead, it showed zero. No balance, nothing pending, just empty. I sat there for a second thinking it had to be a display error or a sync issue, but when I connected it to my node, the reality hit hard. The entire amount had been transferred out 3 weeks earlier to an address I didn't recognize. There were no signs of a break-in, no damage to the safe, nothing missing except for that one thing. That's when it clicked. Lauren had known the code to the safe during the marriage, and I'd never bothered to change it afterward. It was the kind of oversight you only realize matters after it's too late. I picked up the phone and called her, keeping my voice as level as I could. "Lauren, did you take my crypto?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "I don't even know what that means," she said. "Stop calling me with this nonsense. You're just bitter." That denial didn't surprise me, but it didn't help either. Crypto doesn't disappear quietly, and every transaction leaves a trail. I hired a blockchain forensic analyst, which cost me $500 and turned out to be the best money I'd spent in a long time. Within a couple of days, he'd mapped out the movement of the funds. He explained it to me in simple terms. The funds were moved from your wallet, split briefly, then consolidated again. About 2 weeks later, they were sent into a single account on a centralized exchange. He paused, then added, "That exchange requires full identity verification. Whoever owns that account isn't anonymous." I took that information straight to my lawyer. We filed a civil suit for theft and conversion and requested expedited discovery to identify the account holder. The judge didn't drag his feet, considering the amount involved. A few days later, we had a name. It wasn't Lauren. The account belonged to her new boyfriend, Derek. I sat in my lawyer's office when he read it out, and I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. "So she didn't take it," I said. "She just handed it to someone else." My lawyer nodded. "That's what it looks like. Now we decide how to proceed." Instead of going after Derek immediately, we took a different approach. We filed a criminal complaint because this wasn't just a civil dispute anymore. The access to the wallet required knowledge of the recovery phrase, which had been written down during the marriage. That put it squarely into fraud territory, especially given the timing, months after the divorce was finalized. At the same time, we sent Lauren a demand letter that included the blockchain trace, the exchange account information, and a copy of the divorce decree where she had explicitly waived any claim to the crypto. The message was simple: return the full $300,000 within 72 hours or we escalate everything. She hired a lawyer, which didn't change much. His first argument was that the wallet had been marital property. My lawyer shut that down immediately. The transaction occurred 6 months after the divorce, he said. There's no claim here. Then things got worse for her. During deposition, Derek folded almost instantly. He admitted that Lauren had given him the device and told him to convert it to cash. He even produced text messages where she told him, just don't ask questions and don't tell anyone where it came from. That was enough to shift everything from suspicion to proof. Derek's text messages are the nail in the coffin. Just don't ask questions isn't the instruction of someone who believes they have a legal right to the money. It's the instruction of someone who knows they're stealing, and Derek, faced with real consequences, chose to save himself rather than protect Lauren. Once that came out, the situation escalated quickly. It wasn't just a dispute over ownership anymore. It became a clear case of fraud and conspiracy. Derek cooperated to protect himself, and Lauren was left trying to explain a story that didn't hold up. The criminal case moved faster than I expected. Within weeks, charges were filed, and the evidence was straightforward enough that there wasn't much room to maneuver. Her defense tried to suggest she didn't understand what she was doing, but the texts and the timing told a different story. Last week, the court handed down the result. Lauren was convicted on fraud-related charges and ordered to repay the full $300,000. That money came from selling assets she'd kept after the divorce, including the house she'd fought so hard to keep. On top of that, there were fines and probation terms that made it clear the court wasn't treating this lightly. As for Derek, he didn't walk away clean either. He'd taken a cut for helping convert the funds, and I filed a separate claim to recover that portion. From what I've heard, he's scrambling to liquidate whatever he can to cover it. The crypto's back where it belongs now, sitting in a new wallet with a new seed phrase, secured in a way that doesn't rely on old habits or shared knowledge. I changed everything that should have been changed years ago. It's a lesson I won't need to learn twice. Lauren, on the other hand, is dealing with consequences she clearly didn't think through. She saw something she once dismissed as worthless and decided it was worth taking after all. The only difference now is that it cost her a lot more than she ever expected to gain. The one that cuts the deepest? Story 3. The HR director got a professional smackdown. Kevin got humiliated in front of his own team. But Lauren? She committed a felony because she thought she was smarter than the system. She was wrong. The blockchain doesn't forget. Text messages don't disappear. And a $500 forensic analyst was all it took to unravel everything she'd tried to hide. She ended up with nothing but criminal charges and a lesson she should have learned before she ever touched that wallet. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.